They tried to steal my home, bold and shameless. HOA President Karen Whitman, smirking, said, "Pay up or leave, and if you think you can fight me, good luck." She thought she was untouchable, but what she didn't know, I had proof that would destroy her, and when it all came crashing down, she never saw it coming. But let's start from the beginning. The golden autumn sun cast a warm glow through the trees as crisp leaves crunched beneath my boots. I was savoring my morning coffee on the porch of my home, a place filled with years of love, memories, and the laughter of my late wife and son. Suddenly, a flash of yellow caught my eye, an envelope taped to my front door. My heart pounded as I tore it open. Notice of eviction. You are in violation of HOA regulations. Vacate the property within 14 days. I froze. Eviction? My house was fully paid off, and I never signed up for any HOA. My grip on the paper tightened as heat rose in my chest. This was my home. How dare they try to take it from me? Before I could process the shock, the doorbell chimed, and there she stood, Karen Whitman, HOA president, radiating smug superiority. Arms crossed, lips curled in a knowing smirk, she spoke with icy authority. "You've been notified, John. Your yard's overgrown, and that shed of yours, non-compliant. This community has standards, and I will enforce them." The audacity, my fists clenched. "Karen," I bit out, keeping my voice steady, "I am not part of your HOA. I own this property outright. I have the deed to prove it." Karen's eyes sparkled with malice, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, didn't you hear? We annexed your property last month. It's all legal. You owe $15,000 in back fees, or pack your bags." Can you believe this? Just like that. My home, my sanctuary, under siege by pure greed. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a shakedown. But I'll tell you something. They messed with the wrong man. I didn't fight for my country just to be bullied off my own land. And Karen, she may think she holds all the cards, but the game's just begun. The air felt heavy as I pushed open the glass doors of the county records office. The faint hum of printers and distant phone conversations buzzed around me. The place smelled of old paper, ink, and bureaucracy, a battleground where truth often got buried under red tape. But not today. I wasn't leaving without answers. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes, slid a manila folder across the counter. "Here's the record for your property," she said. My fingers trembled slightly as I flipped through the pages, and there it was, a scanned document, stamped and filed, showing my property as part of the HOA. My name was signed at the bottom, but my heart stopped. That wasn't my signature. The strokes were stiff, the letters wrong. It was a crude forgery. My stomach churned with a mix of disbelief and fury. So, Karen really crossed the line, straight into criminal territory. That evening, the HOA meeting buzzed with fake politeness and passive-aggressive chatter. Fluorescent lights flickered above the cheap conference table, but the room fell silent the moment I slammed the forged document onto it. My voice, cold and sharp, broke through the hush. "You forged my signature, Karen." I felt my pulse in my ears. "This is a crime, and I will prove it." Karen, lounging in her seat like she owned the world, barely blinked. Her lips curled into that all-too-familiar smirk. She tilted her head and said with syrupy condescension, "If you really believe that, John, take it to court." She chuckled, her eyes glinting. "But trust me, HOAs always win." Can you believe the nerve of this woman? She was caught, and she still acted untouchable. I felt my fists clench, part rage, part disbelief. Then, from the back of the room, a firm voice cut in. "I'd listen to him, Karen." Heads turned. Standing tall was Mike Evans, my neighbor, retired attorney and a man who knew his way around a courtroom. His sharp eyes fixed on Karen. "Forgery's a felony," Mike said calmly, "and I'd be happy to help John prove it." Karen's smirk flickered. For a second, just a second, I saw her mask slip. But she recovered quickly, her voice turning icy. "Well," she hissed, "let's see how you handle this first." The next morning, I woke up to a fresh slap in the face, a $5,000 fine from the HOA. The so-called violation, unauthorized landscaping. You want to know what they were calling a violation? My vegetable garden, my own backyard, a space I had poured my sweat into, suddenly illegal in Karen's twisted world. But that wasn't all. I stepped outside and felt my blood run cold. There, mounted high on a pole, security cameras. But these weren't for safety. They were aimed directly at my backyard, my property, watching me, spying, harassing, violating. Can you imagine that? Cameras shoved into my life without my consent. How is this even legal? But here's where Karen made her biggest mistake. She thought she had me cornered. She thought intimidation would make me fold. Well, she didn't know who she was messing with. I called Mike immediately. Together, we installed our own cameras. But this time, they weren't pointing at my garden. They were pointing at Karen. Because if she thought she could watch me, I'd make damn sure I was watching her. The sky was a cold, steel gray as I sipped my coffee on the porch, but something felt off. Then came the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. I looked up and felt my stomach knot. A sheriff's patrol car, lights off but presence loud, rolled to a stop. And there she was, Karen, flanked by 2 deputies, her eyes sharp, her lips curled into that same condescending smirk. "John," she announced, her voice loud and full of fake authority, "you're trespassing on HOA property. You need to vacate immediately." I felt the heat rise in my chest. My property? Can you believe this woman? Now she's weaponizing law enforcement to try and steal my home. One of the deputies, tall and calm, stepped forward, his voice even but firm. "Sir, we'll need to see proof of ownership." My heart pounded, but I was ready. "Oh, Karen, you thought I'd crumble?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the truth. "Here's my original deed," I said, unfolding the crisp, notarized document. "Purchased, paid in full, no HOA agreement." Then, with a steady hand, I presented another paper. And this, a notarized letter from the county clerk, confirming my property was never part of the HOA. Not last month. Not ever. I watched Karen's smirk twitch. Oh yeah, she felt it slipping. But she didn't know. I was just getting started. I held up my phone. "But you see, Karen." I swiped the screen, my thumb hovering over the play button. "I brought some receipts of my own." I turned the phone to face the crowd now gathering, neighbors, the entire HOA board, and the deputies, every eye fixed on the screen. And then, play. The footage flickered to life, clear as day. Karen, standing at my mailbox, her eyes darting left and right before forcing it open. She stuffed a folded piece of paper inside, that forged consent form. A gasp rippled through the crowd. But oh wait, there's more. The audio crackled and suddenly, Karen's voice, dripping with greed and arrogance. "John's too stubborn to sell, but once I lock his place under HOA rules, I'll flip that property for a fortune." A fortune. That's what this was about. Not rules, not compliance. Pure, raw greed. The crowd murmured. Neighbors' eyes widened. A woman from the board shook her head in disgust. And Karen, oh, Karen, her face drained of color, her mouth opened but no sound came, just panic. She turned to the deputies, her voice cracking. "No, he's lying," she shrieked, but her voice was weak, hollow, and everyone knew it. The deputy's voice cut through her noise, cold and final. "Karen Whitman, you're under arrest for mail tampering, forgery, and attempted fraud." And just like that, click. Cold, steel handcuffs snapped around her wrists. Her mask shattered. The Karen who had bullied, threatened, and lied was gone. In her place, a desperate, fallen fraud, eyes wide with shock. Her voice, once sharp and arrogant, broke into pleading sobs. No, wait, this isn't fair." But oh, it was more than fair. Her knees buckled, and as the deputies pulled her toward the squad car, her face twisted. Tears, gasps, panic. And you know what? Were those tears of regret? Not a chance. Those were tears of a bully finally beaten. And trust me, they were the sweetest victory I've ever seen. The courthouse stood tall and imposing, its stone pillars casting long shadows in the morning sun. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. The gallery was packed, neighbors, journalists, and HOA members all waiting to see how it would end. The murmurs of the crowd buzzed like static, and every eye was fixed on one person, Karen Whitman, seated stiffly at the defense table. Gone was her smug confidence. Now her face was tight with tension, her hands clenched together as if holding on to what little power she had left. I sat across from her, my heartbeat steady but charged. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of depositions, witness testimonies, and evidence that tore Karen's lies apart piece by piece. She had tried every trick in the book, crocodile tears, gaslighting, and excuse after excuse. "I was just following HOA rules," she whimpered to the jury. "This is all a misunderstanding," she sniffled to the judge. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she sobbed, voice cracking for pity. But her performance was laughable. You could feel it. No one was buying it, especially after they saw the footage. Because nothing hit harder than the sound of her own voice, bragging about flipping my property for a fortune. The tension snapped as the judge finally spoke, his voice heavy and deliberate. "Karen Whitman, this court finds you guilty of forgery, fraud, and mail tampering." The room fell silent, as if the whole world was holding its breath. And then, bang! The gavel came down, hard. The judge continued, his voice ringing through the chamber. "You are hereby ordered to pay Mr. Parker $50,000 in damages and are permanently removed from the HOA board." Oh, you better believe that felt good. But then came the cherry on top, the final blow that nobody saw coming. "To cover the legal fees," the judge announced coldly, "the HOA will foreclose on Ms. Whitman's property." Yes, you heard that right. Karen lost her own home. Her face. Oh, you should have seen it. Her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Gone was the arrogance. The mask shattered. "No. Wait," she gasped, her voice cracking. "You can't do this to me," she wailed, but her pleas fell flat. And the crowd, my neighbors, who had lived under her reign of terror, they erupted. Applause, cheers, even whistles. People were hugging, shaking my hand, some even crying, because finally, the nightmare was over. The HOA board, humiliated and exposed, was ordered to reverse every illegal annexation and rewrite the bylaws, this time with community oversight. As for Karen, Her fall from grace was swift and final. I watched from a distance as movers packed her belongings into a truck. Neighbors stood by, some watching with crossed arms, others with smirks they didn't bother to hide. No sympathy, no allies, just a bully brought down by her own greed. And me? I returned to the place that mattered most. My porch, my home. The wind was crisp as it lifted the American flag above me, its fabric snapping proudly against the sky. I stood there, my heart full, not just with relief, but with pride. Because this wasn't just about property. It was about principle. I didn't just win a lawsuit, I proved something, that in this country, no bully, no board, no Karen is above the law.